Hey everyone, welcome to Logan's Mosh Pit. Glad to have you here. Do me a favor and please subscribe if you haven't already. I'm so stoked for another episode of Rock and Read. This week we're going to read Chapter 10 of Janis, Her Life in Music. Chapter 10 is called Texas Co-Ed. Let's see what's going on with Janis in Chapter 10. To greet us, at the beginning of the chapter we have a quote from her which says, "It's such a quiet and peaceful existence, and I'm enjoying it so thoroughly." With that, let's begin. After the long bus ride home to Port Arthur, Janis arrived at Lombardy Drive weighing a skeletal 88 pounds. She collapsed in 16-year-old Laura's bedroom and slept for days. As she withdrew from amphetamine addiction, she suffered anxiety, depression, mood swings, and stomach ailments. At 22, she began to assess her past and future. Truly frightened of how close to death she had come, Janis focused on changing her life, transforming into the normal daughter her parents wanted, and giving up the things that nearly led to her demise, music, and its accompanying lifestyle and intoxicants. Thanks to her engagement to Peter DeBlanc, the white picket fence seemed attainable. Life as a housewife and mother a safe option. She could at last fit in, her inner darkness and turmoil smothered by domesticity. Yet over the next year in Texas, the shadows returned as she struggled between her love of singing and her desire to please her parents. Though a part of her would always long for the white picket fence life, her talent was just too big to be contained by any kind of boundary, even when she was the one trying to impose it. Janis's appetite gradually returned, and she wolfed down Dorothy Joplin's comforting, familiar dinners. Her stewed vegetables, ham hocks and pinto beans, roast beef and fried chicken helped nurse Janis back to health and gain weight. Laura drove her to Jefferson City Shopping Center to buy clothing, including underwear, which she didn't own, and long-sleeve shirts to cover her needle tracks. At the dinner table, Janis discussed going back to Lamar and her impending marriage to DeBlanc. Over the next 5 months, she wrote Peter some 70 letters. Her correspondence functioned like a journal where she could dissect her feelings letter by letter, coming to terms with her past as well as reporting on her new life. Just as Seth Joplin had once asked Dorothy to write him what she was thinking, in a way her mother was unable to do, Janis put down on paper her innermost thoughts. She clung to her future plans with DeBlanc as if to a life preserver. And with her powerful will, she shut out warning signs that Peter was not the knight in shining armor she once asked old boyfriend Jack Smith to be. When Janis first met DeBlanc, her speed-fed delusions and scatter-shot thoughts could explain her overlooking his many faults. Back in Port Arthur, sober and increasingly healthy, Janis nevertheless desperately still held on to her fantasy. She saw DeBlanc as the one thing that could save her life, while her exceptional voice could only lead to her destruction. "I hope you get to leave San Francisco. Wow, everyone should leave. It's so nice out here in the real world where people are happy and proud of themselves and good," began her first letter to DeBlanc, who was still in the Bay Area. Peter did not live in the real world, nor was he good. However, he traveled to Mexico soon after Janis's departure and began an affair with New Yorker Debbie Boltrier, an airline employee and San Francisco State student. They made plans to move together to her Manhattan apartment. In San Francisco, Linda Gottfried met another of DeBlanc's lovers who was several months pregnant and claimed he was legally married to yet another woman in New York with whom he had a child. When Gottfried notified Janis, her disclosures didn't seem to affect Janis's dreams of having a future with Peter. "I so want to be with you," Janis wrote him. "I don't mind your analogy to a cat's 9 lives. I don't mind if you've had 8 wives before me. Then I would get to be what I want, the last and lasting one. The one you keep. But I could count only 3 or 4. Can you verify that there really are 8, please?" "Wow, then you'd have to take me because I'd be your last chance." Of course, Janis kept this information from her family and reported only DeBlanc's many achievements, as he conveyed them. A genius in electronics, an M.A. from McGill University in Montreal. Mensa membership, undercover work for the French army during the Algerian War in the late 1950s. He claimed to have dual citizenship and hail from an affluent family in upstate New York. In reality, DeBlanc grew up in Niagara Falls, New York, and never attended college. A skilled liar since his teens, he had married young, but deserted his wife and child, assumed someone else's identity, and moved to the West Coast, where he used a variety of aliases, posing as a prosperous deal-making entrepreneur. He knew how to flatter intelligent women, and a former lover told writer Alice Eccles, "You could be yourself 100% with him." I know that's how Janis felt. He was very open-minded and accepting of who you were. DeBlanc was as charming in correspondence as in person. Desperate for stability and love, Janis let his sentiment wash over her. "I've never read such a nice letter," she once wrote back. "I started crying and saying, 'Wow, baby, I hope you mean it.'" After receiving another, she replied, "The reason I wanted to write was just to tell you how beautiful your letter was, my first love letter. It was lovely, Peter, and I'm so glad you feel that way. I love you for all time." Blank occasionally telephoned Janis. She would wait by the phone with the kind of desperation she had previously for her drug connection. It was as if she had replaced meth addiction with obsessing over Peter. When they made plans for his first visit to Port Arthur to prepare him, she described her family in a lengthy, touching letter. "My mother, Dorothy, worries so and loves her children dearly. Republican and Methodist, very sincere, speaks in cliches when she really means, and it is very good to people. She thinks you have a lovely voice and is terribly prepared to like you. My father, richer than when I knew him and kind of embarrassed about it, very well read, history his passion, quiet, and very excited to have me home because I'm bright and we can talk about antimatter yet. That impressed him. I keep telling him how smart you are and how proud I am of you. My sister, 15 years old, lovely, sweet girl. I brought her a makeup bag, you know, show her a few tricks. You should see her. 2 drawers of hair rollers, a makeup table with 2 mirrors and 3 shelves of makeup. Quite the young lady. I'm taking lessons from her. She's learning to play guitar quite well on a guitar I gave her last year, and she sings Joan Baez ballads in a very sweet voice. In fact, tonight she's singing at MYF, Methodist Youth Fellowship, and I'm going to hear her. She thinks quite a bit of me, much more than I thought. My father and I were talking, and he said that Laura had said that she didn't think I was wrong in anything that I have ever done, and that made me feel very nice. I kept slipping and calling her Linda, which she recognizes as a compliment, i.e., she is like a friend to me. We talk about folk music, and I talk about you, and she's thrilled for me. My brother Michael, now about 5 feet tall, absolutely huge, and grown almost age 12, boyish grinning smile, and floppy hair, Levi's and bicycle, loves me dearly, wants me to live at home, and likes to show me off and impress me. Proud, embarrassed, wants my affection. Wow, he's a nice little boy. I sure do love him. I'm always wanted a boy just like Mike. I like him. Janis enrolled at Lamar, signing up for classes in world history and English literature. She regularly went swimming and golfing, played backyard badminton, and polished card games such as bridge with her family. Several of Janis's old friends stopped by to welcome her home. Though Patty and Dave McQueen lived in Houston, Patty drove to Port Arthur for a visit. She was waiting for this fellow she had fallen in love with, she remembered. Now married, Philip Carter and his wife Diane lived nearby, as did Adrian and Gloria Haston. When classes started in July at Lamar's Summer 2 session, Janis carpooled with Adrian, a graduate student, but most of her time was spent at home. She especially enjoyed Sundays alone with her father, listening to Beethoven, while the 3 religious Joplins, as Janis referred to them, went to church. Almost as if she had assumed a new identity, she wrote her fiancé about who she had been and the person she was becoming. Strange, it's such a quiet and peaceful existence, and I'm enjoying it so thoroughly. Fun isn't what I want these days. Strange, I never thought I'd ever say that. I'm one of those old-fashioned thrill-crazy kids, you know, or at least I was. I could never see any value or anything to be sought after in anything except fun, and now, dig me, I've got better things to do than fun. By late July, her love letters, anticipating her long-awaited visit, also detailed her Lamar classes, reading Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, a medieval romance, and academic achievements. Finally, in August, DeBlanc arrived in Port Arthur, having traveled from New Orleans, where he had secretly been with Boulterie, his girlfriend. The Joplins found him gracious, polite, and seemingly happy to see Janis. He was tall and slender with a dignified air, Laura wrote in her memoir, Love, Janis. He had straight blonde hair, parted to the side, that kept falling across his face. There was a certain nervous rhythm about his efforts to keep it out of his eyes. He wore a rumpled suit, but exuded a demeanor of calm strength. Dorothy Joplin wouldn't allow the couple to sleep together. He looked at Janis and she at him, Seth recounted, and Dorothy said, I don't care how you look. You're not going to sleep in this house that way. Regardless, DeBlanc charmed Dorothy and Janis's siblings, and before departing, he asked Seth for a private discussion in the backyard. Soon Dad called us back and announced, Peter's asked for my daughter's hand in marriage, and I have consented. Laura recalled, Janis jumped up and down, hugging Peter and clutching his steady arm as if it were tethered to reality. The moment excited us all. He planned to return at Christmas with a ring and asked that the family wait around until then before announcing their engagement in the local paper. After receiving what must have been a prearranged call from Boultrie in New Orleans, DeBlanc claimed that he had to leave suddenly due to a death in his family. He explained that he'd be staying with his aunt, uncle, and cousin Debbie in New York and gave Janis his new address, a brownstone on West 75th Street between Central Park West and Columbus Avenue. Flying to New York, he continued his performance, riding the Joplins in flight on Eastern Airlines stationery. Still integrating himself, he thanked them profusely for their hospitality, and appealing to Dorothy, apologized that the grammar and sentence construction in this note is ridiculous. Soon after, he shipped her a silver-plated coffee service. During his visit, she had been embarrassed that she couldn't serve coffee properly. He called Janis and asked if her mother would like matching candlestick holders too, and she told him, no, we only use candles during hurricanes. When she reported the conversation to her mother, Dorothy whimpered, and Janis dashed off a note to Peter saying, if it's not too late, Mother would like those candlestick holders. She curbs my pragmatism. Dorothy started planning the wedding dress she'd make her daughter, while Janis began stitching a Lone Star pattern quilt like the one her mother made her in the 1930s. My mother was really charmed by your letter, although I must say she seems very smitten by you anyway, she reassured DeBlanc. I really have to tell you how much my family liked you. My brother keeps going, gee, I sure would like to have Peter for a brother-in-law. And Laura peeked up underneath her hair once to say, and he has such broad shoulders. Mother thinks you're very polished and have lots of potential. That's a compliment. And even Daddy got up out of his reading chair to come into my room and tell me that it looked like I'd pick a fine, smart young man who could go anywhere he wanted to. Sure is smart. And me, well, I still think you're just perfect. I love you, and so does my family. In the 6-page letter dated August 21st, she also related that Linda Gottfried, now married to Malcolm Waldron, had gotten a teaching job in Hawaii, and that she and Dorothy were sending a few reams of advice. Janis described several new school outfits she had bought, accompanied by her sketch of one. After her final exam, she planned to take her siblings to a Houston Astros baseball game, sew new dresses, work on her quilt, have an engagement photo taken, and visit the doctor. We now suspect an ulcer. Her sense of humor intact, she mused about her predicament. Mother has told me that when I get married, she will give me a beautiful crocheted bedspread, which her mother made. So my hope chest is filling. I do have to get one. Do they still make them? Good heavens, are they expensive? Big, heavy. Do you know what they are? I think they're an American myth. I'll probably just have to set all my hopeful belongings over in a corner somewhere. Anxiety continued to plague Janis, though, and when DeBlanc's letter stopped briefly, she called him in New York. Boultrie, who answered, claimed to be Cousin Debbie, and lied that Peter couldn't write because he'd run out of stationery. Janis sensed the deception, and later, after Debbie answered again, she confronted DeBlanc via the U.S. mail. When that girl answered, I just felt really wronged. I just wanted you to say, oh wow, baby, I love you, and of course she's just my cousin. Silly, but you didn't. You just sat there and acted like you didn't care what I thought or if I felt hurt. Janis had also clearly realized that no matter how hard she tried to fit in at Lamar Tech, she'd even taken poise lessons according to Laura, her classmates still considered her a weirdo, and that she, herself, could never be one of them. Thought that since I wasn't king beatnik and attention seeker anymore, she wrote DeBlanc, and I wore dresses and shoes and makeup and acted quietly and looked like everyone else. but I'm still just sort of different somehow. All those blithering co-eds with their cod print dresses and blondish fluffy hair and Texas draws and, oh now you'll come ons, just know that I'm not one of them. But then, that's fair I guess. I know they're not one of my kind of people either. Janis depended on her family more than ever for the attention she needed. Mother is getting worried about me because I stay home too much, she wrote to Blank. She doesn't think I spend enough time with people my own age. Dorothy brought recorders for the family, perhaps to offer Janis a wholesome musical activity, and the Joplins began nightly practice sessions on the instruments. Dorothy, Janis wrote to DeBlanc, was the most earnest recorder player I've ever seen, stubbornly thudding her foot and peering at the book through her bifocals. When DeBlanc finally called, his ruse of family wealth became more elaborate, with tales of yachting with an uncle and his pending inheritance. Talking to you about money this evening sort of sobered me up, she wrote him on August 24th. After we hung up, I was kind of giddy, panicky, walking around on my tiptoes, wringing my hands and shredding napkins, whining, "Oh, moan money. What am I going to do? I never even knew anybody that wasn't plain old ordinary. We're too young. I wanted to be able to make meatloaves and stews and save money cleverly on my household budget. Oh, why did this have to happen to me? I make such a good poor person. How was I to know? He didn't look rich. Geez, he was as funky as anyone else." My family just sat back and snickered incredulously. My mother kept saying, "Well, Janis, you can be happy and have money too. I mean, you don't have to fix tuna casseroles to have a happy marriage." Mike said, "Wow, Janis, he's still the same on the inside. He's just better on the outside." Daddy just put his head in his hands and chuckled. Well, Laura said, "Well, if you don't think it'll work, tell him you have a sister." I finally decided that if you did have money, even though it would put a crimp in my Peter and I struggling together, uphill poor but happy anyways plans, you would do something useful with it, like starting your own business again, or putting it away for the kids to go to college, or blowing it on a honeymoon in Europe. I kind of like that one, and it wouldn't really get in our way. I mean, what I'm trying to say is doing nothing is very detrimental. We both know that only too well. And I don't want you to just live a useful, bored life of ignoble ease. In fact, you're telling me that upset you so much that I had to go out in the backyard and play 2 swift games of badminton to calm down. Later, Daddy took me aside, placed one hand on my shoulder, looked seriously into my eyes, and said, "Just remember, Janis, we've always done all we could for you." Then he gazed out the window sternly. Then he turned back around to me with his eyes twinkling and giggled back into the living room. Janis's white picket fence fantasy, together with her being totally sober for the first time in years, led her to become more introspective, dwelling on thoughts and feelings she'd either put into her singing or pushed aside by drinking and drugging. Watching television coverage on the Gemini 5 manned flight orbiting Earth, Janis was transfixed by, and perhaps longed for, the astronaut's freedom to orbit without its atmosphere, and soon to be leaving it altogether, she wrote to Blank, who claimed interest in working for NASA in Houston. Which brings to mind your security clearance. What's happening? Reporting on his supposed job searches, DeBlanc had mentioned needing a security clearance. Dorothy promptly researched technology companies looking for personnel with Peter's qualifications, and Janis mailed him a list of firms that are hiring and in dire need of technicians, including Dow Chemical, National Cash Register, IBM, and Texas Instruments. Meanwhile, Janis, fearful of repercussions from her addiction, got a complete medical exam and wrote her fiancé, "This was sort of my last showdown with upness, to see if I had really made it out or if it was still hurting me. And I really have made it. I'm really alright, and ain't nobody gonna make me be ugly again. I am not anemic. There's nothing wrong with my liver or my blood, and no gin problems that he can see now, although if I have any more problems, he said he would probably give me some hormones. He suspects hormone imbalance because of the fact that I'd never gotten pregnant. She may have not considered her 1962 miscarriage a pregnancy. Talking about that hormones kind of embarrasses me." Over the next 3 months, DeBlanc detailed numerous excuses to postpone the marriage, including his illnesses and hospitalizations, a new job that did not work out, and a lack of funds. For unknown reasons, he even suggested a visit from Cousin Debbie to the Joplins on his behalf, but it never materialized. He penned one bizarre note in Russian. Janis wrote increasingly alarmed letters and made near-hysterical phone calls to sort things out. Heaven, she wrote him, I don't want to wait 2 years or anything. I'd like to get married in February or March right after I finish this semester. So please, let's try to save money so we can get married. It's nice being engaged and everything, but I think I'm going to like the married part better. At one point, DeBlanc contacted Seth at work asking for a loan until his delayed inheritance came through. Seth apparently sent DeBlanc a check to cover supposed medical tests at Beth Israel Medical Center in New York. In a September 11th letter, he apologized to Seth for taking the liberty of calling you, and in another note, for the delay in publicly announcing their engagement, and for all the esoteric wordplay. He scrawled in large letters across the bottom of the page, I want to marry your daughter. How about it? Janis took a full course load at Lamar that fall and concentrated on her studies. She proudly mailed DeBlanc a sociology paper for which she received an A, with the humorous note, I guess having depressing first-hand knowledge of social problems helped. Mother said to call it my application for the position of wife of a Mensa member. Hope you don't think I'm silly sending this. Her next letter included her engagement photo, in which she appeared elegant and solemn, with a wounded look in her eye. Her hair neatly pulled back from her face and styled into a chigon atop her head. She wrote, I hope I look pretty enough to show to your family or friends. Oh, pooh, this is the first time in my history being an egomaniac that I felt shy. I'm so insecure. I've got to constantly fret. In the same September 28th letter, she described the cosmic blues. I've been moaning lately about the pains of growing up, all kinds of pain. My most recent grievance is a very real pain because of a wisdom tooth. My lower jaw is all swollen and everything's a drag. But there seems to be an almost insufferable amount of less literal but just as potent type of pain we young people have to go through. Of late I've been saying how very glad I am to be finally clearing the brink, to be happy and grown up and able to relax and not ache all the time. God, I would never be young again. I'd have to cry all over. My father and I were bantering on this subject the other night at dinner. He quoted the old cliché about youth being wasted on the young, and I said in all earnestness, although everyone else laughed, that you shouldn't have to be young until you were old enough to cope with it. But dig me, I'm a real live set in my ways, be wisdom-toothed adult now. God, at last. In October, with DeBlanc still remote, Janis at last turned to music. As in the past, singing provided a salve and helped her regain self-confidence. My guitar playing is growing by leaps and bounds, she wrote him. I do a really great version of a blues called Come Back Baby in G, a 1955 Ray Charles tune. I really wail on it. If you can call it wailing when you do it all alone in your bedroom with your door closed. I've got a high falsetto part in it that is too much. I wish I had fans that thought I was as good as I do. So far, this is my best thing. I'm working on some others, and I do them fairly well, but I still don't have enough to do a set or anything. Besides, where would I do it? Poor Dad is being driven to distraction by my practicing. Laura's guitar playing doesn't bother him too much. She plays quietly and sings softly. But me? I've got a big thumb pick and I really play and really sing too. And he sits in the living room feverishly trying to be calm and placid and listens to Bake. Poor thing. On a rare outing together, Janis and her father went to the movie Ship of Fools, based on Catherine Ann Porter's despairing 1962 novel. But instead of good old-fashioned escapism, she wrote DeBlanc, it was very depressing, and I identified with absolutely everyone in it. Janis looked up her former college friend, Frances Vincent, a singer-waitress at Beaumont's Halfway House, a folk music cafe located in a 1909 bungalow. With Vincent's referral, Janis was offered a gig and began polishing her old repertoire. The people from the halfway house wanted me to work this weekend, she wrote to Blank, but I didn't feel like I'd had enough rehearsal, so I didn't. Didn't feel like it anyway. Philip Carter suggested she record at the home of his friend Neil, a classical musician with Beaumont's Symphony. On October 10th, she wrote to Blank that she'd been up there about 9 hours doing the thing, and I only got 3 songs. God, what a drag. Neil didn't really know how to record on his recorder. It was really a hassle. Singing, being nervous. I got all weak and shaky for a while, but we finally stopped to eat. Then I felt better, but the tape recorder was broken, so I just quit. I'm tired. Well, anyway, to the tape. Two tunes, Come Back Baby and Once I Live the Life of a Millionaire, a version of Nobody Knows You When You're Down and Out, and one really pretty ballad, Once I Had a Sweetheart, a traditional English ballad recorded by Baez. I hope it's alright, and I hope the blues don't scare people. I'll send it as soon as I can. Anyway, it's engraved with the blood from my cheek, so I hope you like it. Janis continued to reflect on her earlier recklessness, as if trying to convince herself she was now changed and attempting to look at life objectively from my new happy vantage point, she wrote to Blank on October 14th. She described her tumultuous periods in Venice, Austin, and San Francisco. Her conclusion? I really seem to have been trying to do myself in. I've been worrying about this quite a bit, but I've decided that there is no chance. I guess whatever I used to hate myself for, I don't anymore. Or maybe I've just grown up. It's not there anymore. After each horrible experience during my recuperative period, I always nurtured the belief that what I had done or just left was really pretty cool. But I've never felt so positive about anything not being desirable. I guess I've really changed my mind this time. Every night I try to go to sleep, my head starts filling with past unhappiness. Am I obsessed, and why? Why do I think about all this? I guess we both managed to plow through a lot of. It's been enough to make me nothing short of fanatically determined to have it right once, and that's what we're doing, right? I wish we could be together. I want to be happy so bad. Night after night, lying in bed awake, her mind churning, Janis managed to convince herself that her self-destructive tendencies had diminished and that it was safe for her to return to music. She began channeling her feelings into lyrics, composing melodies to accompany them on guitar. One of her new songs fantasized about what she had hoped to attain with the blank. Come away from me, and we'll build a dream. Things will seem like they never seemed. They could be. No one will cry alone in their sleep. There will be no loneliness hidden down deep. Just like the Pied Piper, I'll walk through the streets, gathering all the happy people I meet. We'll join hands and fly through the sky, leaving our troubles here to die all alone. She taught it to Laura, who loved it and memorized the song. But years later, Janis ridiculed it as cliched, telling her sister, "Sing it all you want to, Laura, but don't tell anyone I wrote that." Turtle Blues, on the other hand, presented a more authentic self-portrait of Janis hiding away in her shell, thinking too much. Turtle Blues would appear on 1968's Cheap Thrills. I guess I'm just like a turtle that's hiding underneath its hardened shell. Whoa, whoa, oh yeah, like a turtle, hiding underneath its hardened shell. But you know, I'm very well protected. I know this god life too well. Janis performed before an audience for the first time in nearly a year at the appropriately named Halfway House. It was really nice, she wrote to Blank. They have an old blind man named Patty Green playing piano. I might work there this weekend. If I do, I may sing a few ballads and back myself. I've gotten quite a bit better on the guitar and can actually do an adequate job of playing now. I've learned some new ballads from Laura and some of her books. You like that kind of singing, so I'm going to be able to do it. I've been playing all day, and it's really nice. But folk scares me more than blues. It might evolve into a weekend gig, too. She then added, lying to him, or to herself. But it's funny, I'm not all that ambitious anymore, but I'd still like to do it. In mid-October, DeBlanc informed her that he was returning to the hospital to see if a parasite was causing problems with his spleen. Janis implored, "Please have your cousin Debbie write to me. Is there any way she could get me an airplane ticket so I could come up there to see you?" She enclosed Russian tea cakes she had made, Mother's favorite recipe, but warned they were very fatty, so make sure it's okay to eat them. On October 19th, Janis wrote a cheery letter to him at Beth Israel, describing her latest purchases for their future home. 2 sheets and 2 pillowcases, really beautiful linen with a scalloped rim for $15. I know that is ridiculously high, but they're simply lovely and will last forever. Mother said she's never had any linen that nice, and she's been married. You wouldn't believe what I did last night. Sat around reading the Sears and Roebuck catalog, making out a list of what I want and what I need and how much they cost, etc. I sure am happy. At letter's end, she inquired, "How are you doing in the hospital? How are you reacting to treatment? Do you feel sick? Are your white blood cells dying?" Shortly after that letter, DeBlanc claimed that his psychiatrist, who put him on tranquilizers, told him not to marry until his health improved. The inheritance never materialized, nor did a diagnosis for his health problems. To cope, Janis took Librium, a tranquilizer used for panic attacks, and she began seeing a psychiatric social worker, Bernard Giriatano. In one of their first sessions, he recalled, she told him, "I want to be straight like Port Arthur." Finally, Janis could no longer avoid the truth about DeBlanc. She wrote him for the last time on November 11th. "It's getting hard for me to believe and understand you." Her letter explored her anguish and terror, as well as her determination to deal with her fears more clearly, something that her therapist had helped her do. "I've been fairly adamant about my determination not to get up again. Well, it seems now to have developed into a rather neurotic tenure. I never relax anymore. I seem to be really mortally afraid that things won't go right somehow, and I'll end up back in that jungle that I'm obsessed with. The reason I went to that counselor is because I had suddenly realized that I was building my stability and progress on sheer terror, and that won't work. It's too precarious. I sit in classes and never do anything wrong, but it's just because I'm so horribly afraid. I keep talking about one step back being the end of me and everything. From my new slightly objective vantage point, induced by Librium and a few days easy breathing, I think I was maybe a little disproportionately afraid of you too. You see, I was really sure that you were finding yourself unable to cope with things, and that I couldn't trust you. That is, put my trust in you. So anyway, this is it. I'm much calmer now. No longer terrified when I talk to people, and I'm going to try and get this irrational fear under control." It is unclear if DeBlanc ever confessed his infidelity, or if Janis confronted him about his double life, but their engagement was over. Undoubtedly, Librium kept her emotions in check while her marital fantasy crumbled around her. Yet DeBlanc's betrayal and deceit would have lasting effects, making it nearly impossible for Janis to trust those who claimed to love her. As she grieved, she sharpened her focus on music. She booked another halfway house gig and visited the Jester, a folk club in Houston where singer-songwriter Townes Van Zandt played blues and country and western covers, as well as dark originals such as Waiting Round to Die. Janis auditioned there to mixed reviews, according to her old fling and Jester regular Frank Davis. She was too strong for everybody. Janis had more success at Houston's Sand Mountain Coffee House, opened by middle-aged Corinne Carrick and her son John, to present girls with pretty voices and guys with deep voices, and performer Don Sanders. Janis auditioned with Win and Boy Blues, recalls Sanders, who didn't know what the to make of it. Her face turned red, and she kind of swung back and forth and whacked on her guitar and sang with all her body, powerfully crossing the gender line. I didn't think she had a chance of communicating with the audience. She was really wild, although John Carrick liked her a whole lot. Janis passed the audition and got a December booking. Janis's Thanksgiving weekend show at Beaumont's Halfway House yielded her first rave review. Her old friend Jim Langdon, by then a writer for the Austin Statesman, caught her performance. In his Night Beat column, he described her California Odyssey and called her the best blues singer in the country. After such humiliation from Peter DeBlanc, the accolades meant much to her, rekindling her self-esteem, and were a reminder of how singing could bring a quick, dependable high. Terrified that Janis would backslide, Dorothy Joplin did not want her to perform. But her daughter could not be stopped, though she was very anxious about it, Frances Vincent recalled. Driving to Houston in December, Janis left her mother a note with details about the coffee house, her traveling companion Frances Vincent, and Corinne Carrick, who was putting her up for the night. On stage, Janis wore a black sheath dress and pumps, her hair pulled back conservatively. The coffee house was packed, and she blew them away, according to Vincent. It was just incredible to see all these people there who were well thought of as folk singers. They were astounded. Among them were singer-songwriter-guitarist Guy Clark, who had seen her at the Jester and thought she wasn't making any compromises. It was far out. Janis visited the Langdons in Austin during the holidays, playing guitar and singing to their 2 young children next to the Christmas tree. It must have been painful experiencing the life she had won with DeBlanc. When she stopped by Threadgill's, another Austin club, she discovered that rock and roll now ruled the scene. Even Kenneth Threadgill had formed a band, the Hootenanny Hoots, with Julie Paul on drums. Former Waller Creek pal St. John played in the rock group Conquero, and Beaumont's Johnny Winter, who had formed a blues rock trio with a Port Arthur drummer, played the clubs. But Janis continued to focus on the blues and folk songs she learned on guitar, including Ida Cox's Wild Woman Don't Have the Blues, which she had picked up at the coffee gallery from George Hunter's bandmate Dan Hicks. A highlight of Janis's new set was her chilling take on Buffy Santamarie's Codeine. Janis had written her own lyrics to the Native American folk singer's song about codeine addiction from Santa Marie's 1964 debut album. When Janis performed it, she credited Santa Marie, but mentioned that she had changed the words to include these harrowing lines. On the day I was born, the Grim Reaper smiled. Codeine became the object of my dreams. It's the reason I breathe. It's the reason I walk. The reason I sleep. The reason I talk. Soon my devotion will all be paid. Codeine will kill me. That's the bargain that we made. Her gripping delivery assured her audience that she had lived a version of those awful words. Janis was back at Lamar Tech in January 1966, but once again music had captured her heart. During a weekend visit to Austin, she sang Pal St. John her new song, Women as Losers, which encapsulates Janis's feminist side, said St. John, connecting to that strong female inner. Janis was smart. It was a gripe about what a it was to be a woman. Janis, he added, struggled with that a lot. Janis asked St. John to teach her one of his, and he gave her Bye Bye Baby. She learned it in time for her debut at Austin's new club on Red River Street, the 11th Door, the first weekend in March. St. John, Terry Owens, and other friends were surprised by Janis's new onstage persona. She appeared in a very adult and somber black dress, said St. John's bandmate Bob Brown. Everything was quite formal, the kind of performance you'd expect for an assembly of college professors. We were proud of her and respectful, but incredulous. It was an amazing transformation from the jeans, sweatshirt, brawling, cursing Janis we knew. Jim Langdon had arranged the gig and booked a photographer and a local radio station to document the set. The bootleg recording demonstrates Janis's confidence handling a mixture of blues and folk covers and originals. Her own Apple of My Eye, an up-tempo, modern-sounding blues, was possibly inspired by the Animals' 1964 hit version of House of the Rising Sun, or the Stones' cover of Bobby Womack's It's All Over Now. Joey Roll Morton's 219, written by Mame Des Dunes, was a jazzy blues sung in a sultry alto, while I Ain't Gotta Worry, which she credited to singer-songwriter Hoyt Axton, documented in a yearning soprano her wistfulness about the Bay Area. I'm going back to Frisco. All my friends are there. It's heaven by the bay. In the self-penned Turtle Blues mimicked the Bessie Smith song she loved, with lines such as, I ain't the kind of woman who'd make your life a bed of ease, but if you go on drinking, honey, won't you invite me please? During her song introductions, Janis sounded formal, even scholarly. Though the show went fairly well, Langdon recalled it was a mixed crowd. A lot came expecting to hear something like Joan Baez or Texas folk singer Caroline Hester. Instead, they heard Janis with a couple of balls the size of cantaloupes. Half the crowd was crazy about her, and the other half had no idea what to think, like they were hit by a neutron bomb. The following Sunday, Janis returned to Austin for a high-profile event Langdon organized at the Methodist Student Center Auditorium to benefit blind fiddler Theodore Jackson. Janis was the only woman in the afternoon show, among a half-dozen blues and rock acts, including notably a new group, the 13th Floor Elevators, featuring a raggedly charismatic young singer, Roky Erickson. Janis's set was well received by the sold-out crowd of 400, particularly her encore, Turtle Blues, which she had introduced as semi-autobiographical. While she stole the show, according to Langdon, Roky Erickson's shrieking vocals were an eye-opener for Janis. The teenage singer showed no restraint when he sang. His raspy howls and yelps delivered surreal lyrics. That was the electrifying thing about Roky, said St. John, that he could hit those notes, the scream of the banshee. Erickson's emotional, unrestrained sound would inspire Janis's first attempts to be a rock singer. Her ambition growing and her confidence building, Janis wrote Langdon from Port Arthur, thanking him for his help and asking for more bookings, as well as copies of press clippings and photos from the concert. In just 5 months since her nervous sets at the Halfway House, she was ready to plunge back into show business. She started a new scrapbook, her first since 1959, and artfully placed on its pages an 11th Door matchbook, a concert handybill, onstage photography, and clippings of her reviews. During her therapy sessions with Bernard Giratano. However, she echoed her mother's fears that performing could destroy her. Dorothy wouldn't allow Laura to attend Janis's concerts, even those at alcohol-free coffee houses. Seeing Janis's joyfulness return, Giratano encouraged her to play music, and she occasionally took her guitar to sessions. Janis engaged in occasional flings with women and men, which she discussed candidly with her therapist. She said she enjoyed it, he recalled, but she would come in terribly disappointed if her night didn't work out so well, saying that a 15-minute lay wasn't worth it. Just after her college semester ended, Janis returned to Austin for a week with Jim Langdon's family. She had earlier written him that she was seriously contemplating spending the summer there, though she worried it would probably be a disaster. She wondered if he could get me enough work to keep me from starving. Then, without warning, she learned from a friend that her old beau, Travis Rivers, now living in San Francisco, had driven to Austin to find her. As Janis explained in a letter to her friend Linda Gottfried Waldron, he was bearing word from Chet Helms, who is now a big man in SF who throws big dances with great rock and roll bands, and Bill Ham does his light shows, wanted me to come out there and sing with this blues band he has. So I called, and he verified it very enthusiastically, and also told me if I got freaked out, he'd at least give me a ticket to go home. So I thought I'd just go. Talked to all kinds of people, and no one discouraged me. As excited as she was, however, Janis chillingly sensed the danger ahead. Everyone thought it was a good idea. I so wanted to be discouraged. But she lied to Waldron about not wanting to leave, and being encouraged by her friends to go. Langdon, for one, thought her leaving was a bad idea. I don't trust Travis, recalled Jim, who had already booked several upcoming Austin gigs for her. Worrying that Janis could be hurt again, he recommended she hone her craft and rebuild her confidence in Austin before jumping back into the fray in San Francisco. But after Janis and Travis Rivers reunited at a friend's house, they fell into a passionate night of lovemaking. Travis is kind of a madman, but a groove. Like a less refined Pat Cassidy, Janis wrote of her longtime crush, and he's huge and hairy. Langdon recalled her explaining that she hadn't had a good ball in an awfully long time, and Travis was a good ball. That was reason enough, she said, to go with him to San Francisco. When she called Helms, "Do you really think I'll make it this time?" He reassured her she would, and that Speed had vanished from the scene. He neglected to mention his role in the city's LSD-fueled dances. Rivers, who had previously met Seth and Dorothy, urged Janis to tell them about her plans, so they drove from Austin to the Golden Triangle. On May 27th, she saw her therapist, saying she wanted to go be what I am. Giratano recalled, she was miserable in Port Arthur and had to get out. While Rivers waited in the car parked on Lombardi Drive, Janis went inside and couldn't bring herself to tell Seth and Dorothy the truth about her plans. Instead, she claimed she was returning to the Langdons. On May 30th, nervous and excited, she climbed into a '53 Chevy, toting a duffel bag of clothing, books, and some weed. With Rivers behind the wheel, Janis sat next to another passenger, a really freaky meth-ridden person, terrible and nervous and ugly and omnipresent with lots of dope and point syringes, as she described in an unsent letter to Linda Waldron. I'm really freaked out. Very humorous, actually. It's the one thing I wanted to avoid, very uptight about it. Finally assured myself I wouldn't have to be around them. And here he is. God, he's another George the Beast, only not likable. As in her letters to Peter DeBlank, Janis now began to mull over her conflicted feelings about relaunching her music career with a former partner in crime, but one who, like Janis, had gone straight. I really want to try to do a new rock and roll thing, she wrote Waldron. And Chet says he already has the setup and really wanted me to sing. Says the guys who make up the band have all heard me and think it would be a gas, 60s slang. After all, I say to myself, it's summer. I could call it a summer vacation and go back to school. I dig traveling again and have lots of grass, and it's really kind of nice. Sure do wish you were around, though. Little afraid of the city. Wish I had a friend there. Linda, can you imagine the knot this all brings to my stomach? Phew, I am scared to death. More later. Well, that's the end of Chapter 10. If you stuck around until the end, thank you very much. Sorry I was losing my voice. These chapters are getting longer. Let me know what you thought of Chapter 10 in the comments. That does it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate the support. I'll see you next time. Until then, rock on.